Men are being left behind. We've been hearing this more and more frequently, right? It's an evocative statement, and it may jive with some of you who have read statistics about diminishing academic outcomes among boys or men who struggle for employment, with mental health or romantic partnership. Some of you receive this statement in frustration about the gender binary and implied heterosexual cisgender bias. And for the rest of you, right now, in 2026, in the United States of abortion bans, domestic abusers, not all men, wage gaps, trad wives, no means yes, sexual predators in chief, and you'd be prettier if only you smiled more. The words "men are being left behind" come across awfully tone-deaf. Right out of the gate, let me be clear. In the words of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, few are guilty, but all are responsible. I love this quote so much, which is to say, this is not a sermon about shame or guilt. Far be it from me to stand here and lecture any of you as though I am not of the most privileged class myself. In fact, that's exactly why I care to speak on this matter. Today, I am holding cisgender men, very much including myself, responsible. But I'm also celebrating the best of what we can be. Because in this very room, I'm surrounded by some of the most astounding exceptions to the rule. Beautiful, compassionate, gentle, selfless men who have taught me a great deal about healthy masculinity. I've been observing and learning positive examples from some of you as long as I've been alive. And most of you know by now that I grew up right here. I'm a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. This is my home. Yeah, thank you. I'm very proud of this. And it wasn't until I came back in my early 30s, by coincidence just a year before I succeeded Vincent as music director, that I truly understood my own religion. Yes, UUism is famously difficult to explain, but I would challenge any one of you to define our religion without using the word love. Love at the center. Loving community. It is the connective tissue between our structural values of justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. So I say I didn't understand my religion for most of my life because I actually didn't know how to love. Not fully anyway. It's only been a few years since I figured out that I've been holding myself back. Holding myself to an unspoken standard encumbered by the myth of rugged individualism, perfectionism, and the part you all saw coming, toxic masculinity. Yes, this term is overused, but I wholeheartedly endorse its efficacy. The idea that strength is strength, accomplishments and power dynamics are strength, self-reliance is strength, a deep voice and big muscles are strength. Love? I mean, I love love. I love my wife. That's a manly thing. I love my dogs, big, fierce, sleek greyhounds. That's manly. I love my mom. That can be a manly thing if you're subtle about it. I love music, of course, but I better be careful about who out there sees me crying every time I listen to a Bruckner symphony or a Bach sonata, which I do, and the choir knows this very well. But love is strength? It's a nice message for a children's story, right? Okay, I'm painting a bleak picture of my former worldview. These weren't actually my conscious beliefs. I'm sure I've been at least wise enough to reject this mindset on the surface. But it's been there all along. I've spent most of my 37 years on this earth allowing patriarchy, misogyny, and social constructs of gender to cut me off from the central defining feature of our humanity. Indeed, by far our greatest strength, and I say this with all the conviction of my heart, love. You already heard what John Lennon has to say on the matter. This is all to say that it's essential for our religion itself to reimagine masculinity and the role of cisgender men in our society. And self-awareness about my gender role has been anything but a linear path. Unequivocally, my single greatest privilege of all was being raised by a wise and powerful single mother. And look, I know I boast a lot about my mom around here, and not for no reason, you understand why. But I will never have enough words to impart to all of you the extent to which she supported and protected my siblings and me when we were growing up. Thanks to her, I've always been mindful of gender roles and sexism. I actually remember our very first conversation about feminism. I must have been about 6 or 7, and I didn't think it was right that girls should be treated better than boys. I mean, it is funny, right? But what my first grade brain conjured in the absence of information about feminism is literally what right-wing media teaches grown-ass adults is feminism. My mom replied, merely asking me a series of questions along the lines of, do you believe that all people should be treated as equals regardless of gender identity? And of course I agreed. Most importantly, she asked, and are you willing to speak up when you see men putting women down? Well, why wouldn't I be? So in so many words, she gently affirmed that I was indeed a feminist, and that is the most manly thing that a man can be. I had the best possible influence, but it wasn't nearly enough. It was the 90s. I was a cis boy and straight, so what was the only insult worse than being likened to a girl? Being gay. Synonymous with stupid or lame, a particularly influential man in my life routinely threatened to me that if I turned out to be gay, he would take me out back and shoot me. And that's the nicest thing I can say. It's the harshest thing I can say in the pulpit. If you were struggling for a definition of toxic masculinity, I suspect we are on the same page by now. I was a kid, and all I could think was, well, thank goodness I'm straight and don't have to worry about this. Did that mess me up? Did it leave me behind? I guess, sure. But I was safe. I knew I was immune from the threat. Nobody had it better than me. And worst of all, despite my mother's best efforts, despite growing up Unitarian Universalist, and despite however open-minded and conscientious I thought I was, the world had trained me to understand that being gay was inherently lesser. Being gay was somehow not masculine. A funny story, in my first week of college, a new friend wandered into my dorm room and told me that the entire floor thought I was gay because I spoke well and took good care of myself. Now, this stuck with me because it was the first time that my 90s boy brain acknowledged gay as the consummate compliment. Should these not be mainstream masculine aspirations for straight men too? Where did we go wrong that they're not? These days I get awfully squeamish when I hear anyone attempting to define masculinity. Of course, on one end of the spectrum, you have the so-called and frustratingly taxonomically stupid manosphere. An ecosystem of uncredentialed, white, allegedly straight, conservative male podcasters with unfathomable influence. The worst of them teach violent masculinity, violent misogyny, violent transphobia and homophobia. Being a man is about subjugation. Being the so-called alpha male. Women won't sleep with you? Well, it's their fault and they owe you. Women are leaving you behind. They're the ones with power and privilege. Yeah. Are you a kind person? A gentle person? No, that makes you a beta. Not a real man. Elon Musk says that empathy is weakness. Right? It's insane. I wish I didn't have to talk about these literal stochastic terrorists. But they have enormous influence. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have well-meaning progressive voices who do their own harm. I doubt they see it this way, but they're meeting the violent misogynists in the middle, conceding that there is technically biology dictating the roles of males and females. Males with XY chromosomes and testosterones are hunters and protectors, and females with XX chromosomes and estrogen are nurturers and homemakers, and men can go out and be violent, women stay at home. Look, my biology education started and ended in the 10th grade. But it's not a damn biology problem. It's 2026, CE. And I think we've learned in civilized, aspiring society that we can override our primal instincts. We are not constrained to define masculinity based on our ancient ancestors or the absolute worst, most hateful corners of the internet crying that cis men are the real victims. And I don't mean to be callous about boys and men who are being left behind in any way. The data are conclusive. Boys and men are performing in school, completing college, and enrolling in graduate programs at appreciably lower rates than girls and women. The National Center for Education Statistics, Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology, and Yale University Child Studies all concur about this. But causes are utterly inconclusive. Potential factors ranging from male attention spans in a structured classroom to low behavioral standards to societal expectations. You know, the same structures, standards, and expectations born of patriarchy itself. A 2025 Pew Research study found the so-called male loneliness epidemic that we hear about all the time is but a myth, with only a 1% distinction of reported loneliness between men and women. However, that same study found that men are significantly less likely to seek support from friends, family, or mental health professionals. That men communicate less frequently with their friends and receive emotional support from friends half as much as women do, and are half as likely to say, "I love you." There it is. It sounds an awful lot to me like men who subscribe to toxic masculinity are leaving themselves behind. I spent years leaving myself behind. Rhetorical question. How many of you men are comfortable saying, "I love you," to a platonic friend, particularly another man? In fact, right, it's a good question, right? I'd like for all of us to try something together. Bear with me. If you are willing to be so vulnerable and expressive, in a moment I'm going to ask you to turn to a neighbor and tell them that you love them. Of course, tell your friend or family member or whomever you're sitting with, but I'd really like for you to turn to a total stranger or a mere acquaintance or anyone to whom you've never said these words, "I love you." Patriarchy has defined the expression as feminine. Patriarchy has sexualized the expression as exclusive to romantic partners. Patriarchy, in its rugged individualism, has depleted our supply of love for each other's basic humanity. Men, women, cis, trans, and non-binary, patriarchy leaves us all behind. Reject the patriarchy with our Unitarian Universalist superpower. Tell someone, "I love you." Try it, please. It feels good, right? It's powerful. It's emotional. That, my friends, is healthy masculinity. And of course, it's equally healthy femininity. And by definition, then, healthily non-binary too. And that's the thing. The gender binary altogether is a social construct, a relic of our attempts to organize a society based on physical traits rather than intellectual or social factors. For a while now, the ultimate gotcha question in right-wing debate forums has been, what is a woman? The obvious intention of bigoted trivialization of trans identity and reinforcement of the fallacious gender binary intended to stump those of inclusive ideology, perhaps less prepared to discuss the nuances of gender. Now, I'm about as qualified to lecture about gender as I am about genetics. But there's an easy answer to this question that even a violinist can understand. And I hope you all get a chance to trounce a hateful provocateur with this response. What is a woman? A person who ethics says she is. Right? Yeah. Only you get to pronounce effing the right way. So, what is a woman? A person who says she is. So what actually is masculinity? The gender binary is a social construct. Genetics and primal instinct can be overridden by a civilized society. Well, I believe that masculinity should be the intersection of our pursuit of love, empathy, kindness, compassion, with the objective lived experience of men, both cis and trans, in a patriarchy, patience, gentleness, safeness. To ignore lived experience is as dangerous as colorblindness is to anti-racism. To pretend that there is no difference between oppressor and oppressed, surely because we'd like it to be that way. Therefore, there is unequivocally a distinction between the masculine and feminine, because we have thousands of years of precedent, oppression, and patriarchal classification behind us. Healthy masculinity must exist as the antithesis to toxic masculinity. That is what makes a real man. Now, one way in which I will actually agree with the mainstream discourse around masculinity is the lack of prominent male role models for young men. Our youngest adults, our youngest voters, grew up with Nick Fuentes, Andrew Tate, Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump. The loudest, most hateful voices amplified by the wealthiest Americans and corporations to weaponize young men against the middle class. And we have a problem, a big problem. Did you know that 31%, almost a third of Gen Z men believe that a wife should always obey her husband? Guess what percentage of baby boomer men agree? 13. Now, 33% of Gen Z men believe that the husband should have the final say in all important decisions, compared to just 17% of boomer men. Are you as shaken by this as I am? None of us will single-handedly take on systemic misogyny, LGBTQIA plus hate, and general toxic masculinity alone. But there are small things we can all do to make a big impact. We can think carefully about our own behaviors and language, the ways that we perpetuate patriarchy in subtle, insidious ways. I don't think that anyone who attends MLUC knowingly disparages anyone else on the basis of gender. But we may do so unknowingly. Men talking over women as a default, assigning gender roles in arbitrary situations, purchasing, say, children's toys or clothes, speaking with a husband versus a wife, or vice versa about certain issues. You've all heard this stuff, but have you challenged yourselves to be the exception? To go above and beyond to deconstruct patriarchal systems? Men, can you recall the last time you willingly relinquished power to a non-cis male colleague, friend, or family member because they were otherwise locked out of power? Actively supported a non-cis male candidate for public office? Allowed yourself to cry sheerly because you felt so moved in the moment? Acknowledged that your expression of anger was threatening? Said I love you to a platonic friend because you simply couldn't imagine your life without them? Men, let us free ourselves to love openly, not only to allow ourselves the mercy to emote and express ourselves as human beings, but to elevate everyone else around us, because they don't have our societal power yet. What a profound expression of love. If men are truly being left behind in any way, let us challenge toxic masculinity at every opportunity, because patriarchy behooves nobody. Yes, of course, men have a ton of privilege, and we better acknowledge it. But male loneliness, academic disparities, self-doubt, involuntary celibacy, incels, are all byproducts of power unearned. It's the whole point of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, not to check diversity boxes as the right would have you believe, but to make damn sure that more qualified people, are not being passed over for underqualified cis white men. How good do you feel about yourself when you cheat and then win the game? I cheated all the time as a kid. Snuck a few Monopoly bills when no one was looking. Peeked at someone else's cards. I was obsessed with winning. And for what? I felt nothing. Elon Musk, Mr. Empathy. He's the richest person in the history of the world, and he paid $44 billion of his apartheid emerald mine inheritance tech investments genius cosplay money to purchase an entire social media platform just to get people to pay attention to him. In some pathetic, literally pathetic way, to feel loved. You think it's working?
No.
I'm glad I figured out my shit by playing board games in elementary school. Now, it's the essence of liberation theology, originally a Christian theological approach, but prevalent in UUism, that none of us are free until all of us are free. Men will not truly thrive until we ourselves have led the charge to free our whole society from the vice grip of toxic masculinity that stifles our collective capacity for love. Because real men use their power of privilege to stand up for everybody else. Real men are feminists. Real men accept all who identify as men to be among their own. Real men are vulnerable. Real men take no pride in testosterone-fueled anger. Real men reject violence. Real men cry. Real men self-reflect. Real men believe women. And as Caitlin has taught me through her own example over 13 years of marriage, real men, above all else, are kind. There is no greater, more masculine strength than kindness. It was only once I accepted this truth that I became a real man. And it is the honor of my life to be among so many real men in this community, this loving community that I forever call my home.